In studio is Attorney Rob Hilton. Good morning, Rob. How are you?
Morning, Bill. How are you?
Okay, so the question is why you need a will. Now, you're looking at people here that are various ages. Of course, I certainly probably do need one. But what age, first of all, at what age should somebody have a will?
I think the key starting point, Bill, is first of all, when you get married, it's the first thing to look at, and then when you have children. That's really, really important at that point.
Because it can get, if you don't and you're not prepared, it can get a little nasty.
Well, if you're young, certainly it can get nasty, but people fighting over guardianship and things like that. I think one of the issues we have is that New York State provides that children, when they inherit, so if both parents die, when the children inherit, they get control of their assets when they turn 18 if there's no will or no trust built in. And I don't know about you, but I don't want my 18-year-olds having control of any kind of money.
It wouldn't default to a spouse?
I'm saying if they both died. No,
okay.
No. So if you left an estate that exceeded $50,000, your children would inherit some of that. Your spouse does not get everything. And so as a result, you have children who would inherit and then would control it at 18. I mean, if you have life insurance that's sizable, things like that.
Gone by 19.
Yeah.
That's the word, right? I mean, that's what we're really talking about.
And the other thing, Bill, is I see a lot of people who do have life insurance, but they'll name their minor children as beneficiaries. That's a no-no.
Okay, so why is that?
Well, because again, they'll inherit the money. It'll go into a custodial account. Someone else will control it that you don't choose.
Oh.
And then they get it at 18. So
Wow.
if you leave $1 million in life insurance,
So you could be, your family could be left living in poverty until your kid turns to be, depending on the situation.
That's an issue, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Wow.
And so some of the excuses for not having a will would be, I don't have that many, I don't have that much value. I don't have the assets. Good excuse?
Never. Of course, it just creates mayhem. I mean, even just the process of handling your estate is much better, much easier with a will.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how much money's there. I have a couple of estates with $50,000 or $60,000, and we've spent, 10 or 15 in legal fees just fighting about it.
Right.
It's not. I mean,
and you're really leaving behind a mess.
You are,
right. I mean, because it's a legal disaster for your kids or your wife or your family. It's a problem.
Compared to the cost of doing a will,
right?
Creating it up front, the cost of legal fees afterwards when you don't have a will is they're incomparable. I mean, you just shouldn't do it if you're responsible.
And what about these services where you can go online and you can do a will right online? And
yeah, I mean, I guess my feeling is
I get my surgeries, all surgeries done online too. It's amazing what they can do right over through your internet. It's incredible.
Is that what you did with your knee?
I wish I would have.
Kneesurgery.com. It was incredible. Yeah.
Using one on online it's like doing it yourself. I mean, you have to understand the questions and legalities to ask.
Right.
It just, you can't get it done right, particularly with young children. And I stress young children, what if you have a disabled child? You can't leave money to a disabled child. There's certain ways you should be doing it. I'm just not comfortable with online.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the guardianship thing again? Because that's an important issue, specifically if two parents were to pass away. That can be really troublesome because which of the set of grandparents would get the custody and things like that?
And I hate to say, this is the time of the winter time. You're driving. These things happen where both parents are killed in an automobile accident.
Right. And you're setting it up for a fight, particularly if the grandparents don't get along.
Right.
You've got siblings. I have one right now where we have an ex-wife battling with a mother. It's just it's a mess.
Yeah.
And so much easier just to put your wishes down in writing, and then
they might get along. Let's not forget here that they did get along until this happened.
Yeah, right.
And now who gets to have the kids? And now all of a sudden it becomes a best. So if it was worked out in your will, that would have to be followed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And certainly the court would want to follow your wishes.
Right.
And then you address issues when you're an older person, you have older children, and they're all fighting about money. That's a mess too.
Right.
I hear people talk about a living will. Is this a living will, or what's the difference between a will and a living will?
A living will is more how to treat you from a medical standpoint if you can't
right.
make decisions. So
Right.
it's really for medical.
Like power of attorney, or is that
Healthcare
even
pro-
different?
Healthcare proxy.
Healthcare proxy.
Yeah,
right.
pull the plug.
exactly.
I don't want to be living in these certain circumstances.
That's a good point too. Some people
yeah.
that's never discussed or never addressed, so a person may be suffering or may not, want to be living anymore.
Listen, I do worry because I'm the type of person I'm going to come out and say we're in a meeting, we're setting up our living will, and I'm like, listen, I don't want to live like that. Pull the plug.
Yeah.
And there I am. I'm out, but I think I've still got a shot, and I'm like trying to communicate. I've changed my mind, and you can't. So I do worry about that at the same time. I mean, are there ways to specifically, based on situations, based on potential legal or medical situations, to
Certainly, you would outline your wishes as specifically as possible.
Got it. Okay.
The most important discussion is the one you have with the person you appoint to kind of outline your wishes.
Right.
Usually it's your spouse, right?
Yeah.
Say to Allison, hey, this is
Yeah.
what I want, even though I know she's inclined to
she want to pull the plug immediately.
right away.
Yeah, that's right. Well, she'd check on the insurance and all that stuff and the legalities of it. And, she might need to keep me alive.
Right. Make sure
know.
the insurance is paid up.
So, all right. So now, obviously, you guys, this is what your law firm does. And you having someone, I know we kind of joke about the homemade type thing, the online thing, but there really is something to be said for having someone there to guide you.
Yeah, I
And
think
we're
it's
always talking about this.
I think it's important, Bill. And the other thing, too, is it's not like the expense is unreasonable. To do a basic will, healthcare proxy, and power of attorney, which, of course, is also very important,
Yeah.
isn't so much that it'll hurt you badly. I understand Christmas is coming and it's a tough time, but in the long run, it saves money.
Yeah.
So
Can I ask as well, how easy is it to change? For instance, say little Johnny, I don't know, I want to go two extremes here. Say little Johnny, you were going to leave your estate to Johnny, and maybe now he's got a drug issue. We hear about this all the time. Or maybe Johnny wins the lottery. He doesn't need, what you were going to leave him anymore. You're going to leave it to Debbie now, or whatever. How easy is it to make changes or adjustments to a will?
it's the 21st century. All this stuff's on computer, and so if I have created the first round on computer and you want to change it, it's certainly much easier than it used to be when you had to retype the whole darn thing.
Also, Debbie would like to know why you didn't give her money in the first place. Why Johnny? Why not Debbie? I really wonder about that.
What did I do?
It is so. How do you handle? It's funny we bring that up, but how do you handle because we see things all the time. You hear stories of she didn't leave him anything. She died and she didn't leave him a penny. Or she left everything to this one and not this one. Or how do you? You guys see that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a client who truly wishes to disinherit someone, there are some things you need to do to make sure that it's enforceable. Right now I'm involved in a number of lawsuits that where we're trying to throw out somebody else's will because they tried to disinherit.
Trying to say that they weren't in the right frame of mind.
Correct.
Yeah.
And there are ways to do it that are proper. This is something you clearly shouldn't be trying on an online will.
Right.
But there's a thing called contest clauses and things where you put language in there that prevents people from contesting. There's any number of measures to take. The other thing to follow up on what you said is that oftentimes I'll hear people who will leave money to, say, one sibling because the other sibling's disabled, and they say, oh, they'll take care of them.
Right.
Right. Well, we're often concerned about that may not happen, or that if the sibling dies as well.
I'm a firm believer that we're all basically good people for the most. I mean, there are probably some really bad people out there, but for the most part, we're all decent people, and we look for. There's a little thing called justification. So in your own mind, something could happen. Like your intention was, I'm going to take care of this sibling. But something allows you to justify not doing it. And I think circumstance, and you just don't know what could happen down the road that could change. Anytime I think you go with that whole feeling of, listen, we all care about each other, everything's going to work out. That's a dangerous road to go down. Because you have to have seen enough situations where there's a justification to change the circumstance.
Justifications. I had to spend it. I had
Yeah.
to use it. I was going to file bankruptcy. There's other issues.
Yeah, you're
like-
making it okay in your own and
Right.
with your own conscience. Now, others will look at it and say that's a terrible thing you did there, but you found a way to make it okay in your head. And boy, it would be nice if it was all put on paper where you don't have to.
That's right.
Yeah.
Write it down.
Write it
Get
down.
it down.
All right.
I want to ask one other thing as well. If you, let's say someone is elderly and they need end-of-life care, there are things or ways to protect assets and property as well. That's
Yep.
correct?
Absolutely. We do a lot of asset protection using irrevocable trusts or other plans to protect assets in case someone goes into a nursing home. Even if they're already in a nursing home, there's still things we can do to protect
Yeah.
assets.
You know, I actually had, if I could just mention an elderly relative, actually who wasn't that elderly, but who was hit with a stroke and needed care for the remainder of her life. And all the home, the property, everything, there was no children to pay for any nursing care, so all that property just basically was absorbed by the nursing home, which I understand they need to be paid for their services as well, but there are things you can do to protect yourself.
Sure.
I also want to bring up, as long as we're talking about all this, let's talk about, there are some negatives. Let's say everything's left to, you have a neighbor, and everything's left, and you're the neighbor, everything's left to you, and they both die next door, elderly couple, they leave everything to you. But it turns out they owe a lot of money. You're now the executor of the estate. Oh, by the way, they were hoarders, and you're the one that is now responsible for what?
Right. Well, you hope that there's enough money in there to pay your commission because it sounds like you're going to have to do a lot of cleaning.
Yeah, a lot of cleaning.
There's a lot of personal
Yeah.
time involved.
Could there be a time where you would say, "Listen, we appreciate the gesture, but we don't want that responsibility."
I find a lot of my clients are struggling because they want to be sure that their kids are okay being executor and that everyone's happy and everyone has a job, when it turns out most of the time the kids are just as happy to say, you know what, have someone else do it.
Yeah,
Well,
it's a lot.
I'm
It's a
okay.
lot.
I'm okay if sis does it.
Yeah.
Right?
I want to piggyback Bill's point. Does a person that is named in the will as the person that would then be the executor or whatever, do they have to be notified? Do you ever get a situation where you give somebody a call and say, "Hey, you were named in this person's will," and they're like, "What? I had no idea." Does there have to be some kind of notification of that?
No, there doesn't, and you can name anyone you want, and you don't have to tell them ahead of time.
And do you become? Let's say there's not enough to the property, and there's enough debt. Do you then become responsible for the debt?
You do not ever
Okay.
become personally liable unless you take off with the money or do something you shouldn't do. I mean, there's any amount of liability related to being an executor that has to do with acting inappropriately. If you do everything right, no, there's no personal liability.
All right.
All right, final question for me anyway. I'm going to go off the wall here. I hear these weird stories that like someone left their fortune to their dog or their. Does that actually happen?
Well,
and who manages the money?
Yeah, so they'll leave it in trust for a pet.
Have you ever had that?
I have not, and
Okay.
I'm not a firm believer in that. I mean, what we'll do, first of all, yes, they can do it. We don't do it a lot here, obviously, just because you're not dealing with the millions like in New York City. And,
Right.
but
Tends to be people that are
Like alone, right?
They're and I don't know. I mean, very, very wealthy that become somewhat eccentric and
absolutely. What we normally do is we'll leave the pets to someone, and then we'll leave some money to that someone
that makes sense.
if they accept the pets.
Sure.
Yeah.
But we can't tie a lot of we don't generally tie a lot of strings to it. Like you got to hold you have to maintain the pets for 20 years. We just say you get the money, you get the pets.
Okay.
Interesting stuff. So obviously they can just reach over to you out to your office.
Anytime, calls 624-9600. We're happy to help.
And you guys, this is what you guys do. That's the.
This is all we do.
That's that I think is important. You're going to affirm that really this is what they do. So, all right, Rob.
Yes.
Thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate your
I'm
time.
gonna just leave everything to you. Just see, it'll be a headache. I just want you to know. My wife will be completely okay with it. Got a break.